suppressment and myelinization of the various neurons, which stunts their ability to communicate across different networks. Axons are covered by the myelin sheath, and there's an exchange of electrical chemical information. And so let's look at the electrical chemical information. We know that transmitters are the chemical transmission between synapses, right? And these chemicals are exchanged from one neuron to the next, and the neurons carry messages between different neurons or between nerve cells and muscles, and they aid in the triggering or preventing the triggering of electrical chemical impulse that's passed from one system to another. So if we just stop there and we look at two major goals that we know in neuroscience, one is goal. How many people have heard of avoidance goals? Avoidance goals, okay. So avoidance goals would be, I'm going to a dinner tonight, and I'm going to be sure not to run any traffic tickets. I'm going to avoid doing that, run any red lights so I get stopped by a cop. And now that's an intentional avoidance goal. Avoidance goals can be positive, right? Now, a woman who is in a domestic violence situation will avoid connecting with her family or doing outreach to shelters in the community because of the internalized depression perpetuated by the male, usually a male, in situations in which they feel that they are immobilized. And so they avoid any effort to kind of reach out and establish economic independence and do that for a host of reasons. But that's an example of one would argue is not a good kind of avoidance goal. We all have approach goals that we establish, approach goals for careers, for involvement in universities. However, when we look at it from a social justice perspective, most of the teenagers, according to national surveys, particularly persons of Latino and African descent, expect to die before they're 30 years of age, given the level of violence that exists in our society. And so this affects neuron synapse changes because it's a belief that's based on ecological realities that go on, and it influences optimal, healthy exchange of neurotransmitters. What I hope to do is to weave in issues of social justice on a biological and neurological level so we continue to broaden our perspective. Generally speaking, excitatory transmitters trigger a nerve impulse in the receiving cell. And a person's overall mental health and learning capabilities and behaviors are all affected by proper functioning of neuron synaptic process, neurotransmitters, neural networks, and different brain parts. So when we talk about excitability of neurons, we have a lot of kids who are going to schools that are absolutely terrible. They're not relevant for the tasks that they face in the future. Trigonometry is one of the things that, how many people have used trigonometry in the last 14 years of your life? We have one person that does. Most of us don't use trigonometry. But we don't learn how to meditate, how to resolve conflicts, how to do a lot of life skills. And then we have teachers who, for their best intent and good-heartedness, disconnect, especially with persons of color, students of color in our schools. So the sort of excitability that goes on at the synaptic level is, I'm excited about getting out of this class and telling this teacher exactly how I feel about them and the whole issue of dealing with learning. So the excitability of synapses and neurotransmitters are grounded in what? Are grounded in environmental experiences. That's where this stuff is grounded at. Neuroscientists begin by saying, let's look at the synapses and the patterns that are raised. They become handmaidens of the status quo because they don't go to the root. Right? There's a saying is that if you want to farm good fruit, you have to go to the root and understand the root. The root is the environmental experiences. That includes the economic injustice that more and more Americans are facing, the unique forms of brain groupthink that's perpetuated by our mass media on violence, and other forms of injustice that we'll talk about. So everyone knows about neuroplasticity, right? How cool is that, right? How many people know about neuroplasticity? Okay, but not all. Okay, neuroplasticity, dig this now. That's Lenny Bruce. People who remember Lenny from the 1950s, I really like Lenny Bruce for a whole lot of reasons. So he has a shtick, as he calls it, so we'll hear some of Lenny Bruce being channeled today. Neuroplasticity is the understanding. When I was growing up, my parents said, hey, you only have so many brain cells now, so if you, sniff glue, which was big during my era, or gasoline, you're gonna be killing some of your brain cells and they never come back. You hit your head, you hit your head in an accident, your brain cells are gonna die and that's it, you're gonna be, so I'm thinking, wow, of all the times I played football and stuff, my brain cells, I have about 2 left, I'm gonna guess, out of this whole thing. But what we find out, in clear, unequivocal terms, is that neurons reproduce. Neurons reproduce and recreate not only new neurons, but new neural wiring and more complex neural networks. Depending upon the type of experiences that one has, those expanded neural plasticity can be viewed as antisocial or negative, or it can be very positive. Using neurocounseling approaches, we are intentionally aimed at fostering the development of new neurons that lead to increased neural wiring that effectively expand certain neural networks and connections in order to sustain therapeutic outcomes beyond the 2 years that researchers say it's that point that 60 to 80% of clients in general manifest more serious relapses regardless of the diagnosis that was implemented. Right? This is real and helpful from a personal perspective, knowing that the brain can recover. Because my father had a stroke. Okay, thanks. Well, please keep doing that too. My father had a stroke, and when I went to neurofeedback, I had been diagnosed with major depression about 6 or 7 years ago, and that has relevance for neuroscience. And then I also found out that I had brain damage that I wasn't aware of when there was a brain map done. Now, I grew up in a situation that there was a lot of corporal punishment going on, and I had been struck in the head a number of times. Of course, I played football. I was on a boxing team. I got really whacked on the head at a protest down at Columbia University in 1967 when the police rioted against the anti-war folks. So cumulatively, it makes sense that I have brain damage in different locales that coincidentally help to stimulate depression and anxiety intolerance. With neuroplasticity, there is a system called CygNet. CygNet is a neurofeedback message. That's C-Y-N-E-T. And I started using that and had 40 sessions with that. And now I'm using something, well, the therapist is using it. It's called BrainMaster. Pretty complex and very advanced neurofeedback. You can check out the booth downstairs. I noticed they're here again this year. So it gives me a sense of hope, not only for myself, but other folks who live through various forms of trauma and various forms of brain injury that is epidemic in our society. And the more we learn and have access to cheaper fMRIs, we'll see how the brain functioning in most of us has been damaged in different ways, including the ingestion of food with high levels of pesticide, but certainly not limited to that. Okay, and let's kind of move on here. I'm going to move on to get to this. Okay, I was going to talk a little bit about mirror neurons. Are people familiar with mirror neurons? Not as many, though. Okay, interesting. Okay, so they're doing an experiment in Italy with monkeys. And they're trying to, check out and validate the location of the brain, about here, where the motor cortex is in control of motor response to different things. And they have monkeys on this side in cages and on this side, and they're feeding the monkeys on this side peanuts. And all of the monkeys have electrodes. And the monkeys on this side are waiting for their turn to get the peanuts, is what they were fed, right? And so people here, chimpanzees, well, there are some people like that, on this side, that they're recording the eating, the motion, the motor motion, and the eating of the peanuts. But interestingly enough, this group of monkeys who have electrodes are demonstrating activation in the same areas of the motor cortex that these monkeys are who are peeling the peanuts. So something about sheer observation and connection with primates who are not getting the same motor experience, but by observation are stimulating the same parts of the brain. This evolved into the whole idea of of empathy. That if we have not experienced exactly what our client has experienced, but we listen to our clients and our responses non-verbally and verbally, as we are trained in our programs, communicate intentional empathy. What we are doing is picking up on the energy and information that's being exchanged from the mind of the client into our own reflections, which may not be exactly the experience, but we're able to activate unconsciously those brain parts that our client is activating by discussing their particular situation. And so empathy becomes much more concrete as we recognize, again, that the mind is the exchange of information and energy. When we connect with a client and are feeling the pain or the sorrow, maybe not in the exact way, but we're activating that part of the brain that the client is activating, they pick up literally on the energy exchange. So we need to look at neuroscience and how we can amplify brain networks so that we can elevate our ability to communicate greater degrees of empathy more accurately, both verbally and non-verbally. You know, clients, everyone experiences clients who are either frustrating or piss you off. And we try to control ourselves, especially with clients I work with. ODD, oppositional defiant disorder clients, usually experience trauma in their lives. They can pick up on the non-verbals very easily. Yes?
I was thinking about the science of what you were talking about the energy transference that we can measure. And I was thinking about how most counselors do give off a large amount of that. That's why people tell us their whole life story while we're sitting in the Panera line waiting for a bagel.
Yes.
And so,
Yep.
what I also think is interesting is that predators, social predators, also can highly pick up on the same energy.
Yes.
And they target people like that. Because
Yep.
I primarily work with veterans of PTSD,
Yep.
trauma, and also child sexual assault.
Well,
And so I find that that energy manifestation is huge there,
yep. Yep.
both in tracking and praying and also healing.
Yep.
So it would be interesting to see if we could teach children who are people who are high in empathy to not just to trust their gut. I hate to say that, but we do have our neurotransmitters in our gut.
Absolutely.
To trust that response, that
Yep.
trigger.
Absolutely.
Of course, abusers teach people, not to trust that.
Yep.
Obviously,
Yep.
they bust their boundaries.
And we can teach, and we can create neural wiring that leads to the development of neural networks in the brain that result in optimal thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Thank you. Thank you for your service. You know, that phrase is so common with the armed forces, and I agree, thank you for the service. But what I'd like to see is teachers and therapists, at the airport. Will all therapists and counselors who are here in the audience come to the, a priority passing here? So thanks for your service with these traumatized kids. I want to turn real briefly, because I do want to get our demonstration in, to a real client. But this client is very similar to clients I work with who are teenagers, 12 to 18, who are in need of foster homes, all of whom have experienced various forms of trauma in their lives. And the trauma is connected to both depression, anxiety, low tolerance for anxiety, and oppositional defiant. This is James. So James is a 25-year-old African-American college student and his therapist, this is an effort to explain mirror neurons and other neurological processes more in detail. So James says, I don't know why it happens, but I get very frustrated over some of the things my friends and coworkers say to me. Now the client at this point starts tapping his foot, so we know there's motor activation going on. He's beginning to talk about frustration, so we know there's some connection, some activation of the amygdala, right? We don't know what degree the hippocampus is functioning, so it can send off appropriate messages to the prefrontal cortex. And the hippocampus's function is what? It's a memory functional entity in the brain, and the memory function of the brain, the hippocampus says, hey, prefrontal cortex, we got a warning down here. You better get hands on deck here. Wait a minute. No, this is not something that we need to flee from or fight for or freeze. No, this is something that's capable of doing, and the prefrontal cortex says, okay, so it's not that serious. What have we done in the past here? The prefrontal cortex, the executive part of the brain, says, okay, what we do is do some deep breathing or walk away from the fight rather than, tell them to walk away from the fight, but shut down the amygdala, too activated, we're gonna kind of, so these are, how the systems kind of work together. But we don't know to what extent, at this point, James is, having an overactivated amygdala, nor his functioning hippocampus, nor the connections between all three entities, excuse me, and what we can do about it. But we knew that the nervous tapping is a signal of a motor activation and potentially amygdala overactivation. But we're not making a diagnosis yet. So the therapist says, give me an example of something that one of your friends said to you recently that you really got frustrated with, and we're encouraging the client to elaborate on his or her problem in more detail. The therapist is better able to understand the client in psychological terms in doing so, as well as having the opportunity to activate motor neurons. Now, Alan Ivy talks about the mirror behaviors, so one might start tapping their foot a little bit slower than the client. And that's a way of kind of communicating empathy, but also kind of using with the energy exchange a slower pace, a more relaxed foot tapping, that will unconsciously affect what's going on inside the James. And this is an opportunity to activate mirror neurons. And the client says, well, that's easy. Last night I was talking to my girlfriend about work, and after taking time to tell her about my ongoing problems at work in a lot of detail, she said, hey, look, I don't understand why you have so many problems at work. That really did it. It made me feel that she wasn't listening to me at all, so I started to get really angry with her, and she said, you know what, and I said to her, you know what, I'm sick and tired of you not listening to me when I'm really trying to explain something important about my life. So the lack of empathy is going on between the two of them. That's not only psychological, but is neurological. Then she said, I'm listening to you, but I still don't know why you're having all these problems. That is when I really exploded and raised my voice and said, you know what I think? I think that you are not interested in what I have to say now, and I have a lot of other times, and you've done that a lot of other times that we've been together. It's really a pain in the ass to be with you sometimes, you know what I mean? The therapist notes that James's voice is raised. He talks faster when explaining the situation. Non-verbally, this client has clenched both fists as he's talking and is nervously tapping his foot faster, all indicators of an activated and potentially overactivated amygdala going on, certainly connected to the motor cortex that has these things happening. From a neurological perspective, the therapist's observation of James leads him to relive his anger from the night before, and it's likely to activate mirror neurons with the therapist's brain. So the clients may say, you know, James, I really hear what you're saying. You're really kind of angry. So they're clenching their fists back to the person, using a different tone of voice, hoping that there will be a different neurological reaction within James. I'm going to kind of go on here. And the therapist says, as you describe your anger in the situation that occurred last night with your girlfriend, I noticed that your fist gets tighter and that your voice gets louder. It's almost as if you're reliving that experience right now. But I can understand and actually feel your anger myself. I really can feel it. You're angry. I'm feeling it right now. So we're kind of building communication on mirror neurons and empathy. Since you earlier said that this is an example of a part of a pattern of the anger that you want to change, our job will be to explore what triggers that are set off in your anger, which now moves into more abstract thinking, but it lends itself to what Ivy calls the concrete operational thoughts. What are the triggers that but it also now begins to open up the prefrontal area of the brain that thinks in more abstract terms. And our job will be to explore what triggers are there that set your anger off, and brainstorm new ways that you can address the problem before it happens, and what do you think about that? Okay, so we're opening up now a new kind of, what do they call it, reframing, not just sitting on the example, keeping the amygdala overactivated. The hippocampus in this particular person was hypothesized to have been shriveled up and pretty, it lacked a memory connection to the prefrontal cortex. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on quite a bit, actually. Any questions about James? it would be good for us to gain understanding of not only psychopharmacology, which I never was an advocate for until I learned about its positive impact on the brain and pharmacology, and also on supplements. Anyone hear of GABA? GABA is, for anyone who's like anxious, you know, and has trouble sleeping, it's individualized. So what I did with GABA was, it was, I think 100 milligrams. I took half of it at a time. You have to kind of adjust it for yourself. It's over the counter. It's not a prescription thing. But we have some of our kids using GABA, as well as the nervous thing that Sean pointed out, just the vitamins.
Oh,
Magnesium.
magnesium.
Magnesium is a good relaxer and changing of different magnesium, and one more, GABA, fish oil. Fish oil, really, really helpful for brain stuff. Okay, here are some issues for counseling and neuroscience, and we'll connect it to social justice. Replenishment, sleep, nutrition, movement and exercise, laughter, hanging out with other healthy brains is real important. You know, I'm particularly working out with hanging out with people with healthy brains, because I find that the interactions I have with colleagues oftentimes is negative, in terms of, you know, people do a lot of complaining in our society, and God knows we have a lot to complain about. But what's lacking in our profession, I believe, is a comprehensive vision that requires different brain functioning. That, you know, they say that without vision the people perish. I think that we could potentially perish with the antiquated, outdated, and techniques that we're using to focus in on helping people adapt to environments rather than transform the environments. The failure for us to do what? To exercise our right and responsibility to dream of a world that can be and must be. This requires focusing in different ways. The kids that I work with have been traumatized and are experiencing ODD, defiant disorder, and they really lack focus. Even when we talk about anger management problems and how to deal with conflict with teachers, I mean, basically our kids will, like a lot of people you know, will tell their teachers to fuck off. And that usually doesn't result in a positive educational outcome. And so we talk about how to, you know, adjust our reactions to teachers in different ways. So focusing is an important way of integrating brain functioning. One technique we use is HeartMath. How many people are familiar with HeartMath? Oh, okay. This ought to be interesting. Can we use this?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a $580 unit that I purchased on my own. And I use it regularly with the kids. I tried mindfulness meditation. They told me to fuck off. So I knew that was not going to be a helpful intervention. But knowing that they, okay, thank you. Knowing, okay. Oh, great. Okay, we're gonna have Dr. Daniels be our, okay. She will be our subject. I'm actually gonna talk to Dr. Daniels in doing this as an intervention, much like I would with the clients I work with who are 12 to 18 years of age, but kind of modify some of the linguistical style to meet an adult.
Might not have the right kind of computer.
I think it's this one. Let's see. Yep,
Oh, okay, good.
but how do we get it up?
Yeah, it'll go.
Okay,
It should.
okay. We're gonna do this for about 10 minutes. Do people remember what I said about the difference between neurofeedback and neurocounseling? What does neurofeedback focus in on? Brain waves. And neurocounseling focuses in on helping to use neuroplasticity to create new neurons, new neural wiring, and new neural networks. Okay? We're going to focus in on brain waves. Okay? I think I got enough juice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You got the thing?
Yes, I do. box here. Here it is.
I think it's over there.
Okay. You look like someone who could help by having this camera adjusted and face us. Would you be willing to volunteer to do that? Yeah. All you got to do is try to get as much of myself and Dr. Daniel. And I really appreciate that. You know, it's very simple to whatever you're doing. Thank you very much. Okay, HeartMath is a form of neurofeedback, and it's very
Actually, I think
simple.
I'm gonna have to watch it, right? 'Cause
I
need
have to
see this.
while you're doing this.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna keep it out like I do my kids. Okay, this is one format, but it's a detailed way of looking at heart coherence, the connection between the heart and brain. I'm gonna go into what we do with our kids, which is the neurofeedback through games. Okay, so you wanna have a seat, Judy? Okay.
But don't I have to look at the screen?
Yeah,
So I'm just gonna I'll just stand.
Okay,
I'm
good. And as we talked about before, we're going to use a computer. I know you love computer games, so we're gonna use games that kind of measure what your heart is doing and
Okay.
what your brain is doing.
Great.
And we are going to see how well you can work at changing colors on this little bar here. Because you're gonna see that there are three colors that come up: red, blue, and green. And what we're trying to do is to make a stronger connection between your brain and your heart, okay? Because you got into a fight last week in school, that's been going on for a while. You said you wanted to make some changes, but didn't know how to do it. We're gonna start real basically with looking at ways to make a difference. Now, how this works is you have to put this on your ear, on your earlobe. No shocks, but what it does is measure the connection between your heart and your brain. And I'm gonna use a big word here, and that's coherence. How your heart and brain work together, right? Now, if you are able to get to a point of red, which you'll see in just a minute, it means that we need to strengthen the connection between your heart and brain, what you're feeling and what you're thinking, right? If you see blue, it means, whoa, we're moving in the right direction. If you see green, it means you have hit the jackpot. So let's listen to, the coach. There's a coach inside the computer that's gonna talk to you right now, and you will follow what he has to say. Right now, you see it's calibrating. That means it's connecting.
You don't even need that. It'll go.
Okay.
Hello, I'm your coherence coach. I'm here to teach you the quick coherence technique and show you how to improve your coherence scores with your M-Wave. Let's get started. The quick coherence technique is a simple 3-step process. I'll take you through each step. First, I'd like you to focus your attention in the area of your heart, in the center of your chest. It's a gentle process where you can just feel your attention.
Dr.
shift to the
Daniels
area
is
of the heart.
adjusting the speed of the ball
Got
to
it?
match her normal
Now, the
breathing
second
rate.
step is adding heart-focused breathing.
That's the adjuster.
Maintain your heart focus, and while breathing, imagine that your breath is flowing in and out through your heart. Try this for a few breaths to get comfortable with heart-focused breathing.
So you're gonna be breathing with your heart.
Now set the breathing pacer to a comfortable pace.
Then we
While
adjust it.
maintaining heart focus and heart breathing, follow the ball. Gently breathe in through your heart as it's going up the curve, and breathe out as it's going
She's
down.
moving to more coherence.
Use the slider to set the speed of the ball so that you are breathing deeply, but easily. Once you've set the pacer to a comfortable level, just keep following the ball, inhaling as it rises and exhaling as it falls.
You're doing a great job.
Now let's get to the third and most important step, the emotional shift. In order to enter a high state of coherence and comfortably sustain coherence, you need to feel a positive emotion. While maintaining heart focus and heart breathing, using the breathing pacer to guide you, try to feel a positive feeling. This could be a feeling of care you have for someone or something, a feeling of appreciation for the good things in your life, or an uplifting feeling you had at a special time or at a special place.
High level of coherence.
Without
Green.
trying too hard, just ease into a positive feeling while maintaining heart focus and heart breathing. Follow these 3 steps: heart focus, heart breathing, and heart feeling to increase and sustain coherence. It's that simple. Continue practicing quick coherence while enjoying one or more of the animations and listening to the accompanying music.
Now let's say that we see that the red is starting to go up again, because she's done a nice job of moving it to blue coherence moderate, then to high level coherence green. If it moved back into green, I would say, Judy, are you feeling in your
Red.
chest?
Yeah,
In the
go
red.
back to red.
If she goes back to red, I would say to the individual, now remember, you have to think about your heart in your chest. Are you feeling that right there? Now, are you breathing through your heart right now? Good, good. Now the big one is, do you have a thought in your mind of something you're grateful for? And we normally see a change in coherence. So we're using counseling skills to coach the person into a greater level of coherence.
Show them the pictures.
Yeah. Now, we can also move from this, after a person has some green going, into animation. And we have things like this. So this is called the star flow.
I don't find this one very good.
So when a person, and clients will readily say that, and you notice how the blue is lit up there? Good sign when someone can express to themselves and be coherent and what we call that, congruent, right? So we say, okay, let's try another one.
I want the garden.
We're gonna do the garden, but one of our clients liked the rain. For some reason, she really likes the rain. So when I put this on, her capacity to show greater coherence by changing brain waves and moving into blue and green gets higher. Okay, so this is a good coaching step. Now we stop here, and I, by the way, you can keep data on this, on each client for each session that you do. So I say, wow, Judy, you really did well on that. Look, let's look at, you see how the green came on? First you started with red. So your heart and your brain weren't really connected, but look, you went into the blue really early, and then you started coming into the green. So how do you feel right now?
I feel pretty good. If I can focus in and do my breathing and my heart and think of positive things, I can move it to the green.
Then let's take a little test. You ready for a test?
Yeah.
A little bit harder? What we're gonna do is to show you a picture of a garden.
Okay.
And the garden is gonna be black and white. And as long as you have your heart focused here, right, focusing in on your chest, and you breathe through your heart, right, you're breathing through your heart, and you think of something positive, you're gonna see the colors of the garden come out. So let's go to the garden. Let's go to the garden. You see how it's all black and white? Now, if you keep focused on your chest, you're gonna see calibrating. So in other words, it's checking your heart and your brain connection. Think about in your chest. Focus in on your heart and your chest. Now focus in on your breathing. Remember, we watched the ball, you're breathing. And breathe with your heart. Oh, look, great job. Nice job. Think of something positive that you're grateful for. I know you've had a lot of tough things going on, but something that you're grateful for, either something you've done or someone else has done. Doing a good job, a lot of blue. Very good, very good. Now pretty soon you're going to see a horse, a little goose. Focus on your chest breathing. Thinking of something positive. Nice deep breaths. You're doing a good job. Nice deep breaths. optimal coherence, we should see a change, and we do. Boy, that pond looks really nice. Okay. Thank you very much.
So you can see, and with some people it's easier, some people it's harder, so sometimes it takes longer. But I think it's easiest if you start for a while on the one that really paces you, so you can get that, and then start moving to some of these other ones. Although I think the kids really like some of the games and different things that appear.
The three things that this has taught me about working with brainwaves is number one, kids and adults love it, but kids really love it with the technology. We have one with a balloon that is, you have coherence, the hot air balloon goes up and goes around the world. We have a baby who's holding his hands out. So we have a pregnant teenager in our program. And so we want to give good energy off to the world, and she can just light up the green for a long period of time. So we're kind of, again, using neuroscience as a basis, using brain wave changes.
So then when issues come up and Michael's on the phone or whatever with these different kids, then you can start to talk about, okay, remember the game. Remember how you do your breathing. Let's do that. Okay, remember your heart, getting in touch, having that coherence in your heart. And then remember also about a positive feeling and what that is. And so it's